Policy Committee. In a moment we'll do some introductions, but welcome to everyone in the public gallery and also those who may be joining online. There are no fire alarms planned, so if the alarm does sound, please exit the building through the main foyer, go down the ramp to the right-hand side and assemble adjacent to the cathedral. We've got a lengthy agenda today, and there is a meeting in here after us as well. So I'm going to ask members, when it comes to discussion items, to be as succinct as they can in asking questions or making comments. And I'm going to have to be quite strict on time on this occasion. We will also have a comfort break around about the 1 hour mark for people. So, introductions. I'll start with councillors and then if we have officers introduce themselves as well, that'd be great. So, Richard.
Councillor Richard Eddy.
Councillor Bartle, Vice Chair.
Cam Hayward, Councillor for Knoll.
Councillor Tom Enard, Labour Councillor for Horfield Ward.
Councillor Collar, Bishopsworth Ward.
Councillor Fabian Buckles, George Troopers Hill.
Councillor Toby Wells, Knoll.
Councillor Serena Ralston, Clifton Down.
Thank you, and I'm Councillor Andrew Brown, Hengrove and Whitchurch Park and Chair. And then I'll start with officers with Cliff.
Yeah, Cliff Brand, Head of Service, Bristol Harbour Authority.
Yeah, Eric Dougal, Bristol City Council Harbour Authority, Harbour Estate Manager.
Emma Howarth, Head of Service, City Management and Response.
I'm Jonathan Diamond from Development Management.
Hello, I'm Angela Marshall and I'm the Adult and Community Learning Manager.
Jane Taylor, Head of Employment Skills and Lifelong Learning.
Shane Wells, Performance Advisor.
Thank you. And Amy?
Hi, Amy Rodwell, Policy Committee Officer.
Good afternoon, my name's Alex Hearn. I'm the Director of Economy of Place at the Council.
Brilliant, thank you very much. We have no apologies for absence or substitutions, so moving on, do any members have any declarations of interest that are appropriate to raise? Fabian?
I noticed one of the items coming up, I do sit on DCB, so I'm not going to comment on that, because I hope we have to comment on it later.
Thank you, Fabian. So moving on, the minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated as a supplement to the main reports pack. Does anybody have any comments or queries on the content of those? No? In which case, can I have a seconder? I shall move. Oh, I saw Jenny indicate, so we can confirm those as a correct record. Okay, moving on, Chair's announcements. So I've got a number of announcements that I want to make today. First of all, I want to cover off the officer decision notices that have been signed off and published since our last meeting. So the first one, the 6th of June, was for £250,000 for survey and repair work for Prince Street Bridge. On the 26th of June, there was a £365,529 grant signed off for passing on to North Somerset, and this is a legacy of a previous arrangement whereby there was a consortium between Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloss for adult and community learning funding, but for historic reasons that gets passported through Bristol City Council each year. And finally, on the 7th of July, there was a decision notice for £1,629, which was split between £1,151,629 for the City Centre and High Streets programme, which also included an element for the business and intellectual property centres that we have in our libraries. and that was from UK Shared Prosperity funding that we got granted through the West of England Combined Authority, and the other 850,000 of that money is being used for the We Work for Everyone programme in this year, which will allow the ring-fenced existing budget to extend that into 26-27. So those are the officer decision notices. The other points I wanted to raise, since our last meeting, the committee model review group has finished its work, and one of its recommendations is that the Harbour Committee will become a decision-making body. So obviously that will result in a change to this committee's remit and overall responsibilities if and when that's ratified by Audit Committee, which meets tomorrow, and then full council. So that's one change that's coming up for us. An update on the local plan. Officers are still working on modifications to that in line with the initial guidance from the planning inspectors following the public hearings. And once finalised, there will be a further round of public engagement on those modifications before the final version of the plan will be brought to this committee and then full council. So I'm saying by spring next year, but I've just made myself a hostage to fortune, haven't I? So we're getting there, I think, is the gist of that. In addition to the progress on the local plan working group's also been looking at a number of supplementary planning policies, which are at various stages of development, but those will be matured so they can be adopted under the new plan once that's in place. And those include a co-living policy, the Broadmead and City Centre framework, St Philip's Marsh master plan, amongst a couple of others. And the final thing I wanted to raise in these announcements is with respect to a number of items you have seen in the public forum with respect to Stoke Lodge and the request from the Public Rights of Way and Greens Committee that we should consider an Article 4 direction to suspend permitted development rights on that site. So I've spoken with officers about this and requested that an options paper be prepared so that this committee can consider this at its next meeting. So those are my announcements. And that brings us neatly on to public forum. So I've got a number of questions. There's 4 questions and 12 statements. The first question is from Martin Rands. I'm trying to see if he's in the... Is Martin here? No. Okay. We shall move on then. So I've got a question from... 2 questions from Professor John Towton. Is he here today? I can't see him either. Okay. So moving on to Helen Powell and a question on the Article 4 direction for Stoke Lodge playing fields. Is Helen here? Okay.
Yes.
Can I ask first, have you seen the written answer to your question?
I have, yes, thank you.
Okay. In which case, have you got a supplementary?
Just to ask whether it is possible in reviewing those issues that officers have said would need to be gone through, is it possible to take account of the evidence that's already gathered? So, for example, there was a petition with 1,500 signatures about the importance of this space to the community. There were 180 consultation responses around the local plan. And conversely, when the fence was up, there were more than 50 complaints about falls and injuries and statutory nuisance. So is that part of the evidence picture that officers can consider?
Yes, that will be considered.
Right, thank you for your question, Helen. So moving on to statements. So there are 12 statements, and I've had a number of people indicate that they are intending to attend and speak to those statements. So I shall go through those in the order that I have them on the paper. And then once I've gone through everyone that I know is intending to come and speak to their statements, I'll see if anybody else is here that hadn't indicated but does want to speak to their statement. So Fiona Evans. Okay, can you pass the microphone back to Fiona? Everyone will have had an opportunity to see your statement, but if you want to speak to it and briefly summarise, that'd be fantastic.
It has been clear for many years Cottam School is hostile to formal decisions that do not support their goal to develop their private playing fields. Of course, this is council-owned land let to Cottam, so it would be appropriate that the council regain control of 23 acres of heritage open space, bordered and dotted with protected veteran trees. Today, there is plenty more appetite for protecting the land against development and privatisation for financial benefit and to fund necessary action. In 2018, during the last administration, a council nature conservation officer told the school in their original fence application there should be badger gates. Council planning officers objected to the poor design, that it created a more threatening environment, that it was not in line with the heritage Grade 2 listed lodge, and because of the restricted walkways it would create. However, they erected the fence 15 metres from a live set, ignoring even their own consultant ecologist to put the fence up at least 20 metres away. Councillor Henry Michelat wrote to the school on 21st of May 21 to ask that they put badger gates in the fence to cut down on the badger deaths that resulted, 1 month on average for 18 months. They ignored him. The fence went through the root zones of protected trees. Cottam's contractors cut through ash tree roots, causing council enforcement action, in brackets the number. They deny these facts to this day. There's never been an assessment on the impact on the well-used and loved adult learning centre at the heart of the land. The perimeter walkway was not maintained by the school. People of all ages slipped and injured themselves on the muddy paths and against the fence. People with restricted mobility couldn't get into the fields, nor people with babies in buggies. Disabled people found it difficult or impossible to use. The council has records of these complaints. The Economy and Skills Committee can help the council take back planning control, avoid further litigation and more huge expense by initiating an Article 4 direction. It was the former administration's decision to change the planning status of Stoke Lodge in 2018, allowing the school to put up a fence without any controls, that led the community to make its second TVG application. We intend to apply for permission to appeal the High Court decision. Further costly litigation could follow. It is easier, cheaper and simpler for the council to take back control of planning decisions at Stoke Lodge, as should have been the case in 2018 and since. The fence was really harmful to the amenity and the well-being of local residents. It would be in the best interest for all to ensure that proper planning process is undertaken in future. Besides, the Department for Education and Ofsted have both confirmed that they don't require perimeter fencing. Cottam School's head teacher gave evidence in court in February that there was no such requirement. Cottam would still be able to make a planning application for fencing. They may well now erect a fence quickly. The council would be landed with the costly job of getting obstructions removed. Please help restore the fair and proper planning process and faith that the council can do the right thing with transparency and in a cost-effective way.
Thank you, Fiona. Helen, you are next on the list. Can I just say that people giving statements don't necessarily need to read out the whole statement because we have had an opportunity to read that. So if you want to summarise or ad-lib a bit, feel free.
Thank you, and thank you for your comment at the start about how this will be progressed by the committee. My statement, like a number of others, underlines the planning reasons that support the council making an Article 4 direction to remove permitted development rights at Stoke Lodge. When Cottam School talks about putting up a fence with a generous perimeter walkway, we don't have to wonder how they're going to treat the local community. We know from lived experience that the space left for the public will be a muddy 2-metre wide strip that feels threatening and oppressive to those who are walking alone, leads to falls and injuries because of lack of maintenance, is often locked and is always inaccessible to residents with mobility issues. and it will have ugly fencing that comes within just a few metres of the council's own listed building, the Adult Learning Centre. So, in my view, taking back control of planning there is clearly the right thing to do. But since the council also has duties to protect public rights of way, and since there is a real prospect of the High Court decision being appealed, making that direction effective immediately is also clearly justified and expedient. So I very much hope that you will be able to take that forward in as soon a time frame as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. So next I've got David Mayer or Meyer. Apologies if I've got that wrong.
No, that's fine. David Mayer. First of all, can I say I'm delighted to hear that you've requested this position paper for you to review the situation next time. So I will be brief because it's all going to come out at the next meeting. It's impossible to understate how vital this field is to the well-being and the well-being within the community. Trying to paraphrase. Right. It's impossible to overstate how awful the situation was when Cottam put up their fence 2 meters high with this muddy, slippery, awful, deadly path all the way round. It was absolutely horrendous. It can't be overstated how awful that was and the damage that it did to the well-being of people within the community. However, I look forward to you debating and reviewing this and hopefully coming to the decision that the permitted development rights should be removed to make this a level playing field so that any proposition to re-erect a fence will be properly scrutinised and taken on its merits. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So next on my list is Shirley Brown. Is Shirley here? Okay.
Is this on? Yeah.
It's on, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I've spoken many times over many years and written many statements to many committees. I've learned a great deal about local authority procedures, and I'm afraid what I feel now is the illusion of democracy. There's a special clause in the lease signed between Cottam School and Bristol City Council, making it subject to all existing rights and uses, including use by the community. The Academy's senior management has repeatedly demonstrated a preference for coercion and control over communication and cooperation. Councillor Eddy himself, at a 2018 meeting of the Public Rights of Way and Greens Committee, said he had never known a school go to war against a community as Cottam School has done viciously and maliciously against us. I fear that although you're going to have an options paper and consider this at your next meeting, the wheels of local authority democracy turn so slowly that the council delays, if the council delays taking preventative action, because the issues involved are complex, Cottam will again defy the terms and spirit of its lease, potentially sparking further costly legal action. If they do, I can only hope that the council will enforce that special clause. If they'd only done that earlier, so much effort and expense and lack of faith from the community towards the council could have been avoided. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Now, is there anybody else here who submitted a statement but didn't indicate they wish to speak and now does wish to speak? And I'm seeing no hands or indication. So thank you very much to everyone for their contributions in public forum. It's much appreciated that you've taken time out of your day to come and take part in our process. Councillor Eddy.
Chairman, with your permission, firstly, can I welcome your commitment to investigate with full options paper the Article 4 order, of course. Can I just clarify, is it your intention it should come to our next scheduled meeting?
That's correct.
And just very much piggyback echoing the concerns of the last speaker. I have to say I've got no confidence in the commitments of or integrity of Cottam School or its governors. Frankly, I prefer to trust the Hamas regime in Gaza, although arguably they behave like terrorists do. But seriously, if there's an indication of the school seeking to use this hiatus to actually enforce permitted development rights, will you consider delegated authority with the exec director to actually cause them to stay?
I will cross that bridge when I come to it, frankly, Richard. Right, okay. Your comments there have provoked colleagues to want to come in, so I'm going to bring Councillor Renard in because I'm not sure they were appreciated.
Whatever the issues that have gone on in the dispute is about, it's entirely inappropriate to be comparing a school to a terrorist organisation, Councillor Eddy. So I'd encourage you to withdraw those remarks. They're entirely inappropriate.
Would you like to respond to Councillor Renard?
I would suggest he can whistle in the wind.
Okay. I'm sure we can appropriate minute what's gone on. Selina, is this on that same topic or is this on something else?
I think both comments, we need to be civil to each other. Are we in the public domain, representative of our residents on both comments? So the last one and the one regarding a terrorist organisation, I can't stress how inappropriate those are.
Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the Policy Committee Work Programme Setting Outcome Report, which is reporting on our work setting day that we had some weeks ago, and is summarises the actions that come from that and how things will be taken forward, or which things will be taken forward and how they will be taken forward. So, Amy, can you speak to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is just a brief report for noting, and it's just outlining discussions that took place at that Policy Committee Work Programme Setting workshop on the 24th of June. So I won't go into too much detail of the report because it's pretty self-explanatory, but I will just highlight the task and finish groups that have been agreed that committee members would like to progress in this municipal year. So that's the High Street Strategy Task and Finish Group, and the Development Viability Working Group, which is actually on the agenda to be established today. So subject to that, we'll go ahead. Other than that, there's just other items that were discussed, and a section at the end which highlights items that weren't discussed at that workshop, but members have indicated they would like to progress. So yeah, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Amy. Members, are there any questions or comments on this report, Tom?
Firstly, thank you very much for pulling this together. I know quite a bit of work and thought has gone into it. I've made this comment in a couple of other places around this report. We need to come back with, and the same for other committees, time bound. So what are we doing when? At the moment we've got a work plan which looks great, but when are these things going to happen? What are the timelines these things are going to happen, and turn that more into a timetable? I think would be really, really helpful for this policy committee, just to get a sense of what's coming when. I appreciate that may still need to be some thought around that. And then secondly, one of the things that's been flagged that was discussed with the Housing Committee, which on the theme of Article 4s, was around Article 4s around HMOs, because as we know, over the years, existing Article 4 directions that have removed permitted development rights around managing HMOs have now expanded largely around the areas where there aren't Article 4s. So if we're going to bring that forward, can we also have something brought forward around looking at a timeline for introducing Article 4s to cover issues around HMOs that have been flagged by councillors in different parts of the city?
you'll be pleased to know that's on the agenda for next time. It's certainly on the forward plan, and I believe it's September committee that's due to come to, but I'd need to go away and double check.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the work plan, Jenny?
Yeah, I think we need to just to follow on the things that we have committed to progressing. We need to actually programme them, and I don't know when we agreed how we're going to do that, because we just said, oh yeah, we'll put them on somehow. Are we just allowing officers to go ahead and do that?
Thanks, Jenny. It is a good challenge, and and when I used to chair audit, we actually did have a work programme, and similarly on Harbour Committee, we have a sort of work programme that says what's coming up over the municipal year to be considered at which points. I will take that away and discuss with officers on some of those things where we've identified that there's an issue that we may need to find ways of addressing, but work out how we A, bring that to the committee, and B, how we communicate that work is being done in the background so that people are aware that things are being progressed, even if they're not on the formal forward plan, or if they're progressed through informal means, for example. Any other questions or items on the work programme? Serena.
Just could be just a minor point, but on page 12, it says additional items suggested by members that were not discussed at the workshop, and the third bullet point from the bottom says to supporting the defence sector. I just want to know if recall that properly. It could be that it was supporting servicemen and women, but I'm not entirely sure.
It was a suggestion made by the Labour group, and I believe it's to do with the defence industry in the area, given that the defence sector, aerospace and whatnot, makes up quite a large employer in the Greater Bristol region.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure you got the wording right. That was all. Just a minor thing.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. If there's no further questions or comments on that, we are just asked to note the report. So consider that noted and move on to the Harbour Business Plan for 2025-26, which is being presented by Cliff. Now, I think, as I indicated earlier, the Harbour Committee is going to become a decision-making body. So this could be one of the last Harbour-related items that we have at this committee. So, Cliff, do you want to talk us through it?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This one-year plan describes Bristol Harbour Authority and guides its service delivery for 25-26. Income and expenditure budgets within the plan are per the 25-26 budget provisions agreed by full council in February 25. And it shows that the general fund contribution for 25-26 will be up to 766,000. That said, the Harbour Authority moved to a fully ring-fenced account in 24-25 and are working towards the Harbour revision order for the requirement to become self-sufficient by 2030. And to that end, a 5-year Harbour strategy and business plan is currently being compiled. In fact, the strategy is now out for consultation. So by 2030, the Harbour should be self-sufficient. Finally, this plan has had input from the Harbour Committee and Harbour stakeholders and was supported by that committee on the 18th of March for submission to this committee for final approval.
Thank you. Cam and then Richard.
So I'm interested in what options are being considered to close that deficit. What is out there that can help base that revenue?
Well, I mean, as far as this plan's concerned, this is just to get us through this financial year, while the strategy and business plan is being compiled for the following 5 years. What's in there? I mean, what's in that strategy? There's 8 strategic priorities, which seek to make more of our harbour assets, in particular the land surrounding the harbour, and not least the water space by increasing the moorings and a range of areas, liveaboard, commercial, etc., etc. And, you know, to take advantage of any other particular income streams the harbour can, you know, glean that additional income from. I can't reel off the 8 strategic priorities off the top of my head at the moment, but if you want to read the strategic plan, it's out there at the moment for consultation. I think, you know, one of the things I need to say, as a fresh pair of eyes, shall I say, is, you know, it's paramount, it's essential that the harbour becomes not only self-sufficient, but it needs to make sufficient margins on a yearly basis to take care of its ageing infrastructure. I mean, as we can see today, this infrastructure is literally falling around our feet, and it's costing a fortune to repair it and replace it. So, you know, again, I repeat, it's absolutely essential that the Harbour Authority becomes not only self-sufficient, but makes adequate margin for the future.
Thank you, Cliff. And I'll just add to that as well. The when the 5-year business plan and the harbour strategy, 5-year harbour strategy is developed, those will also be seeking to address that issue of how we reach and obtain self-sufficiency. There is a number of legacy issues that will unwind over time, and that will help with the increasing the income and the balance sheet of the harbour. And the other thing I would say is the team have worked, as well as the harbour place shaping strategy, which has identified a number of opportunities for commercial purposes around the harbour, which will help with the harbour's revenue account. They've also put together a commercial prospectus that will be going live in coming weeks, which actively seeks to market areas within the harbour with a view to generating more income. So there is a lot of work sort of going on in the background to this to help with that, to help with that overall aim. Richard, I had you next.
I'm not old enough to remember walking around the docks with my parents as a kid just after it had closed from commercial operations, and frankly it was quite forlorn with closed warehouses and things. What it's become, what it could and become, has changed out of all recognition, and that's welcome, of course, and it's a unique benefit for Bristol. Can I congratulate Cliff and the team for what they produced here? I have to say, last year I did fear it could be being counter charter, but you know, how we can sweat the assets, etc. But it's a far more comprehensive document, and it talks as well of the investment we need to make, of course, and the chairman's alluded to that, but also the very present investment in Capricorn Quay, for example, for new moorings, and also the eco initiatives, of course, which are welcome. The one thing I would like to say, obviously this is very much a work in progress. It's a 1-year business plan before we can develop a more singing, dancing 5-year one. But on the budget, you presently mention we make an income from car parks of almost 1,200,000. Now, I'm aware that there are plans, housing plans, for developing the Grave car park and the Essex Great Britain car park. How much, I'm not saying how now one might seek to actually replace this lost income, but how much income could be affected by if that's removed from the picture.
Yeah. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think the car park income is essential, and that'll always be factored into any kind of land use change that is proposed, because the Harbour Authority will always seek to retain that income and potentially increase it with disposal of land.
Sorry to press you, and you may not have the figures to hand, though I'd welcome an email subsequently and copy to the other committee members. Do you happen to know if the Grosvenor Great Britain car parks is taken out of the picture, how much does that reduce our income by?
I could provide you with details of that. I could have a rough stab at it, but I prefer to, we could email you with the figures.
Those figures can be found in the papers of the Harbour Committee should you wish to go in, look them up. I think the broader point I would make is, once the Harbour Efficient Order has been finalised, and it's a bit like the local plan, in fact, the process very much corresponds in a lot of ways with the local plan process, and as far as we're waiting for a third-party agency to give it, the sign-off and the thumbs up. But once we are getting through that process, and once that's formally in place, then we have, and we're treating it as if it is formally in place already. But that means that whenever we are looking at transactions within the harbour area, the Harbour Authority needs to have confidence that it can replace any income lost as a result of any future, future development. So that could involve, the investment of capital receipts in such a way as that they generate a replacement income for any revenue given up, or looking at other sort of solutions. But very much the Harbour Authority cannot. Development cannot happen to the detriment of the Harbour Authority. Toby.
Thank you, Chair. I have a comment and a question. I'll start with the comment, since I don't sit on the Harbour Committee, so this might be my last chance. So in relation to the previous point around the car park income and how dependent the Harbour estate currently is, I think what this actually highlights is that all the other income streams are really too small, rather than that the car parks shouldn't be such a large proportion of the income. And what I was particularly struck by in this report was how low the income was around the events and licensing, that portion of the Harbour estate. Given the large numbers of brilliant events that do bring an awful lot to the economy of the harbour area, and all the surrounding businesses are really benefiting. We need to just make sure that the harbour estate is getting its fair share of that, but I'm sure you're already thinking about that as you develop the 5-year business plan. The question is a bit more of a boring procedural one. This business plan was endorsed by the Harbour Committee in March, which was about 75 days prior to our last meeting. So I'm just wondering why it didn't come to our June meeting, and whether there have been any substantive changes since the Harbour Committee endorsed it, or is it still the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think your first point, the income from car parking, as far as the Harbour Authority is concerned, accounts for about 1/3 of its income. And yes, when you consider the income from moorings and from its estates, car parking is, well, let's rephrase that. Income from moorings and estates should be twice as much as what it is in comparison with car parks. But as the chairman said, any car parks which are disposed of, or which are, put up for further development, that income will be protected in one way or the other. At the moment, the Harbour Authority can't afford to lose that car parking income. Otherwise, its deficit will be a lot more than what it is today. But it does need to build on its moorings and its estate and its events, as you've said, and in the strategy, it actually does address that and how it's going to be done in the business plan. As far as the events is concerned, yes. I mean, the Harbour Authority needs to glean more income from these events, and more of these events need to take place. That's also addressed in the 5-year strategy. Generally speaking, I think the Harbour has been quite gracious in what it's been doing over the years, and it's one of the reasons why Bristol Harbour Authority is in the position it is today. It really needs to get its act together and start introducing new income streams, and it needs to be self-sufficient. And above all, as I said earlier, it needs to have sufficient margin in order to take care of its very ageing infrastructure. So, yeah.
Thank you. And Toby, just to say, I think the first time we saw it at Harbour Committee was in March, but we actually saw it again on 24th of June. So it came to us twice, and in between those times, it went to the stakeholder group as well for comment. So it's actually, so that's why it's not come till today.
Thank you.
I had Richard and then Serena, and then probably look at moving on.
Mercifully brief, Chairman. Cliff, when I made my contribution, I forgot to make one point which I have raised with you separately, and that's we're going to have a look, of course, in the report at the 100 commercial businesses or buildings which are empty, and the Chairman and I and others serve, of course, on the Harbour side forum. And the most regular issue we have from businesses which are leased from the Docks Estate or Harbour Estate is actually leases are far, far too short from the council for them to have the confidence to invest. So I hope this is something it's not going to happen overnight, I know, but we can explore with our colleagues in property services and legal.
Yeah, I mean, just to respond, Councillor Eddy, at the moment, until the Harbour Revision Order has been, fully adopted and has been laid before Parliament, the Harbour Authority is not really in a position to grant long-term leases. And, of course, it realises that anybody who needs to invest in premises or businesses around the harbour needs that, security of lease in order to do so. This is something we are aware of, and we are working towards being in a position to offer lengthy leases to attract businesses to the harbour.
Thank you. Serena.
I just wanted to congratulate you really on the business plan, and also particularly to highlight, I know Councillor Eddy's mentioned it, but the new moorings at Capricorn Quay will generate that annual income of circa £90,000. So hopefully that may be, something that you can sustain and grow in other parts of the harbour. So I like that. But also I was particularly cheered and encouraged, I would say this is a Green Councillor, by the floating ecosystems, and within that the very fact that they are improving water quality and will do so in future, because it just goes to show that environmental and economic benefits, impacts can be interlinked. So if you improve water quality, that makes it more attractive space for people to use, which brings an income presumably. So that's really encouraging. And the fact that also you are, having other locations within the harbour for floating ecosystems. I just wonder if you had a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah, I think, everybody that's seen Capricorn Quay and seen the floating ecosystem, which is neighbouring it, has been, very complementary. I think, one goes hand in hand with the other, or one can go hand in hand with the other. So in other words, we can make, some commercial considerations while taking care of the environment. And, in the 5-year strategic plan, we are looking at introducing more of these, to make the surrounding environment a lot more inviting, which in turn will, attract more visitors and more businesses to a much pleasanter place. Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone. So we are asked to approve the 2025-26 Harbour Business Plan. Can I ask for someone to second that? Richard. And I did see a hand behind, but I saw Richard's first, I'm afraid, sorry. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Lovely. That's unanimous again. So thank you, everyone. Moving on to agenda item 9. This is a Bristol Operations Centre tech upgrade, Chubb Sky response contract amendment, brackets, digital platform report. And Emma's going to talk us through that.
Thank you, Chair. This is to get committee agreement for the extension of... I'm sure. To get for the extension of a contract. During phase 1 of the Operations Centre upgrade, we contracted with a really good supplier around the telecare monitoring platform. During that phase 1 works, and in 25-26 we've now moved into phase 2, we needed to extend that digital platform to all alarm monitoring because the Operations Centre manages fire, security, panic and lone worker alarms. We've subsequently found this supplier is able to do all of that, and we would like to extend it, but to ensure procurement compliance, we have actually done soft market testing with existing and external suppliers to make sure we're not just choosing the one that's straightforward in front of us and working very closely with procurement. This contract gives us everything we need to do. We would require committee agreement to extend the contract to a total value of 1.3 million over 7 years. And please note, committee, that this is self-funded with the Operations Centre income and does not impact the general fund.
Okay, I see a sea of hands. I saw Jenny's first, and then Richard's, and Toby's.
I felt like this paper was quite impenetrable in places, and I think it would be worthwhile just outlining exactly what procurement process you've used so far. Not terribly precisely, but I was sort of thinking like you've done this assessment, and was that like a pre-qualification questionnaire, and how were the suppliers identified? Is there like a framework or a list? So just, can you give us a few more details like that?
I can certainly give you some headlines. We worked very closely with procurement for a start to ensure compliance. We looked at the current 2 existing suppliers and those out in the market. It's a very small market for those that can do all of the things that the Op Centre does. It's not a big player for digital platforms. And we actually did a set of, it's in the, although I haven't named the suppliers appropriately, in the appendix there is a detailed set of questions we asked and a scoring mechanism that we worked through with procurement and with those potential suppliers to actually, ensure that we were compliant and provide a score against functionality, value for money, and reducing the number of systems for the operators is very important.
Thank you, Richard, and then Toby, then Cam.
Have a lot less imagination than Jenny, for example, but I remember the old committee model working group, which had, of course, we had some discussion because although for transparencies and good value, it needs to come properly to committee, there was a genuine debate about whether certain procurement contracts like this, for example, if it's followed to the letter, our procurement system needs to come to committee for a key decision. I have no hesitation in backing it.
Thank you, Richard. Toby.
Thanks. I think it is important that this kind of thing comes to committee because it is a more than doubling of the value of the contract. It's an extension by 1.2 million. It's quite significant. I just wanted to clarify a few things because, like some of my colleagues, have found the report a little bit difficult to follow. So you've touched on procurement rules already. A short question first of all, then maybe if I come back for another. Who are the Northern Housing Consortium that's referred to in the report, and what does that have to do with the selection process?
So the Northern Housing Consortium are in a tender framework, if you like, a big tender framework that a lot of telecare, whether it be suppliers or care suppliers or platform or monitoring suppliers, tender into. So for us as a local authority, Northern Housing Consortium has very housing connotations. It's not to do that. That's just what the framework that overarches those types of contracts is called. And we tender into them to be successful to win business as well.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies. On the income side of things, I know you said it's self-funding, but when we're making a decision like this, I'd expect to see a little bit more in terms of how much money does it bring in. Is it kind of a one-to-one that it covers its costs, or how much margin do we make, for this investment?
So we can certainly give details on email about the income that is around specifically telecare. There are different income streams because it's different monitoring. So telecare is different income to, say, a fire and a panic alarm monitoring, different income to lone worker monitoring. We have those down in our accounts in detailed, but we haven't added them in here because we cover our income. We do full cost recovery. There's no impact to the general fund.
Okay, so one final point on the first recommendation. I'm not sure the way it's written actually makes sense in the context of what we're agreeing to. It's kind of written in a slightly woolly way of it says, work with Chubb Sky Response with a view to securing additional work of a value up to 1.3 million. But shouldn't it be more direct in saying that we are extending the contract through procurement to spend another 1.3 million with Chubb Sky Response?
I went on the advice of procurement of the recommendation they would like to see from a compliance statement.
And presumably that wording was also signed off by legal.
Yeah, absolutely. Legal and procurement have been heavily detailed in this paper.
Okay. Maybe one to look at for future though. Cam and then Tom, and then I'll probably look at bringing this one to a close. Oh, so Serena.
Yeah, I also want a bit more clarity on the procurement. I understand you can't name which supplier is which in the appendix, but is it safe to assume the chosen supplier is the one that scored best?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Tom.
Yeah, I think that was in the appendix. So just to clarify for the committee, with the income will cover the additional costs. How much of that is already locked in and secured income versus how much of that is a gap where you might need to secure further business?
The current income would cover this cost.
The new
additional income by a digital platform that gives us, next generation would be additional income above and beyond this.
So just for the committee's clarity, you've already covered the cost of what you propose to go to in the cost, and there could be further opportunities to make a surplus that can then be invested back into council services.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Also the current costs of the analogue system we already cover. So this is a switch from analogue to digital.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And Serena.
Just very quickly to reiterate one point, but it sounds petty, but it is important. If we could have these sort of reports a little bit more clearly written. One sentence is 101 words in length, and there are typos, and it gets lost in it. And I think it really is important to have that clarity of writing, because it's quite opaque, to say the least. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Serena. We are asked to, let me get to the actual recommendations. So we are asked to approve this is a bit that Toby's already read out, approve the proposal for Bristol Operations Centre to work with Chubb Sky Response with a view to securing additional work of a value of up to £1.3 million over 7 years, and to authorise the Executive Director for Growth and Regen to put in place the necessary arrangements to secure that additional work. Can I have a seconder? Jenny. Saw your hand first. And those in favour? Okay, so that's unanimous again. Thank you very much, everyone. And I am sure for those of you that haven't had the opportunity to have a visit to the Operations Centre previously, Emma would be more than happy for you to arrange a visit there to see what the team get up to, and when deploying all the equipment that we are buying for them. Okay, next we've got, shall we have a break now if we're still waiting unless they're waiting just outside. Sorry, short interregnum, or unless committee members, if committee members would like to have the comfort break now, we can reconvene at 3:05. Yeah. Okay, let's do that. So we are now back to consider the quarterly update from Bristol Temple Quarter. So Karen, I'll hand over to you. Actually, do you want to introduce yourself? Do you, Clem and Jorge, want to introduce yourselves as well? Because obviously you weren't here earlier. And then do you want to introduce the paper?
Hello, I'm Karen Mercer, the Chief Executive of Bristol Temple Quarter LLP.
Hiya, Clem Teagle, Head of Comms for the LLP.
Hi, Jorge Roman, Regeneration Manager, Bristol City Council.
Great. So this is the regular quarterly update to the committee in respect of Bristol Temple Quarter. I'm just going to give sort of the headlines for contents within the report. I think since the last meeting, the team have been working closely with the council team in progressing the land assembly strategy. We are active with speaking to private treaty negotiations with owners within Bristol Temple Quarter, and we'll be bringing a detailed paper back to this committee in autumn this year. We're also continuing the process to secure a development partner to ensure comprehensive regeneration of Bristol Temple Quarter. We're currently in the dialogue sessions and again on target to name that developer by the end of this year. So on target there. In terms of St Philip's, we're currently out to engagement on the various different scenarios for the master plan. That engagement will end this Thursday, and then we'll be spending the summer in September working up the options in order to undertake further consultation later this year, with a view to that being proposed for supplementary planning guidance in Q1 next year. Good news in that we have also submitted the Southern Gateway planning application for the multimodal transport hub. That went in a week ago and has now been validated and should be out to consultation soon. That is a key infrastructure item that will see the relocation of the surface level parking around Temple Mead Station, which is regulatory parking. Assuming that there is a resolution to grant by the end of this year, we're looking at starting on site in Q2 next year. So again, maintaining momentum on delivery of the infrastructure items to meet the grant funding agreement that has been provided by Homes England to the project. I'm very aware that the paper does not give an update on housing as such, but I did want to mention that the team have met with Bristol's City Council's housing delivery team and also the Bristol Housing Partnership, and we're actively progressing a housing strategy that we'll be taking forward towards the end of this year, and we'll be providing an update to this committee in the autumn. Also as well, the community hub is now open, which is great, and we have a number of weeks already booked in for employment and skills training through Building Bristol. The next update will come in the autumn this year, where we should have a lot more to say around the Southern Gateway and what's happening with the private sector partnership and also St Philip's as well. But very happy to answer any questions.
Lovely, thank you. I saw Fabian's hand first, then Serena, then Richards.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a bit of clarification on what you said about housing coming up later, but there was recent news about a site that had been earmarked for housing in the Temple Court area that's been sold because the developers couldn't bid high enough. It's been sold to somebody who's going to keep it as basically industrial and warehousing. So how's that impacting on the Temple Quarter plans?
Is this the site that is within Mead Street area? Yes, so we're aware of that that sale. We are looking to meet with the developer in order to understand what their long-term plans are. I think the development framework is quite clear, and I also know that sort of colleagues within Bristol City Council have also met, so we'll be working through collectively together to create a joined-up approach in respect of that site. And again, I think we would want to come back in autumn this year to give an update on that.
Thank you. Serena.
Yes, so I was up to the hub this morning having a look, and it was a very comprehensive exhibition. Looks like thorough engagement's been undertaken and very helpful people I met there, so thank you for that. I just had a question on page 76, talking about the PSP procurement, and as you mentioned, the dialogue stage has commenced with shortlisted bidders and is due to conclude this autumn. I just I was just thinking about this earlier, that it might not be necessary to see a short list of the bidders. It would be good to have some sight of the process, really, and so to be able to scrutinise it, some transparency of how that's going to work, the interview process and the like. And I just wonder what your comment might be on that.
Yeah, I'm very happy to arrange a separate session to brief you on the process. The memorandum of information for the bidders was submitted on the Bristol Temple Quarter website. We have circulated the questions for both the questionnaire stage and also the dialogue stage are in the public domain. So again, very happy to take you through that. I think we've been very clear in the process that we are seeking a partner rather than a scheme itself, so that early part of next year we could be working closely with the partner, Bristol City Council, as well as the West of England Combined Authority, in order to develop the scheme. But very happy to brief you separately and talk you through what the process is.
Thank you, Karen. Richard.
Karen, thank you for a very insightful report. I found it very meaty, and there's plenty of information reflecting the progress you and your team have made. I've only served on this committee since June, so it's the first I've received, but I look forward to seeing future ones. And I welcome, although it's called the Temple Quarter Update, the fact that there's quite a lot of information about the evolving St Philip's Marsh Master Plan, and certainly with my planning hat, I find that very helpful. My question is a more general one. Obviously, particularly St Philip's Marsh currently has had a number of quite low density in terms of the employees employed, more traditional works, employment uses, and whilst I appreciate there will be future more modern employment uses, obviously they meet a need and that they employ people. So I hope we're not purely kicking people off. To be fair, I don't have an experience with St Philip Marsh, but with Bedminster Green, for example, I knew of several traditional businesses which, frankly, I don't think were given much help by economic development to relocate. How are we conducting our relationships with the existing businesses there?
So I think, firstly, we have employed a company called PRD that works both to the Temple Quarter and also Bristol City Council. They've been out to meet all of the 180 businesses that are within St Philip's Marsh and have been speaking with them for the best part of the last 2 years. So we have a good understanding of how they operate, who's there, what their future requirements are. We have also held business steering group meetings with businesses. There was a more recent one that was attended by the leader of the council and also the mayor of the Combined Authority quite recently to talk directly to the businesses, and they're certainly engaged in the process through the master plan. We also, within the team, have members from Bristol City Council from the Employment and Skills section in order to be able to work alongside us. At the moment, it is too early to identify a relocation sites for them, given that we have the emerging master plan, but we will be continuing to work very closely with them to look at what their future aspirations are and how we can best help them moving forward as the area starts to go under change. But it's certainly a relocation strategy and preserving as many of the businesses, helping them continue and thrive is very much part of what we're doing.
Thank you. And Alex is going to come in as well.
Thank you, Chair. So I think it's also important to reflect on that there's a planning process and then there's the Landlord and Tenant Act as well. And sometimes the planning process has an influence on how people make decisions about their property. But if leases expire, a landlord might take a decision, and it's just referring to the previous question from Councillor Breckles about the site in Mead Street, because something is written down in planning doesn't necessarily mean a landlord will will do it. And I think that's an interesting reflection on the where the market is in Bristol at the moment.
Thank you, Alex. Tom.
Thank you. So it'd be interesting to see with that industrial use value changing, how that impacts the wider St Philip's Marsh area. It'd be interesting to see how you're able to progress there. It was great to come out to the hub that's newly opened. So my first question before I move on to Silverthorne Lane, just a question about CPO, is how is that going? How's the interaction been? Have you had much engagement in that space since it opened a few weeks ago?
Yep.
Quite well, I think. It's sorry to give you a simple answer. Yeah, it's good to have a front door. I think we're still kind of working out what that long-term program of activity looks like. We've got quite a good problem at the moment in that we've booked in, I think it's 2 or 3 months worth of skills training, as Karen mentioned, through the Building Bristol team. That does mean that while people are in there for a kind of week at a time, it means we can't do other things, but I think it's a good problem for us to navigate. And I'd certainly say if people haven't been down, it's worth coming and having a look, and if anyone's got any ideas for what they might want to do in the space, we're all ears. And we've also, one of the big aims of it was to have a space that other groups in the city or organisations who just need a space can come and use it for free. So should you know anyone, let us know.
Thank you. So just moving on to Silverthorne Lane, which obviously started to come forward from the update in your report. I wanted to just understand where we're up to with the school on plot 5, because it's obviously already quite overdue, and we've got significant pressures on our secondary schools. It'd be good to understand where that is up to.
Alex, is there anything you want to add on that before I add in on the schools? Okay, so we met with Studio Hive, who are developing out alongside the school on Friday just gone, and I'm also due to meet with the Oasis head teacher tomorrow. My understanding is that plans are progressing, but again, I want to speak directly with the school in order to sort of ascertain sort of timeframes for that.
Just to add that there's been recent engagement between the Department for Education and our planning colleagues and their consultees in transport and highways, and we're working to address any issues that they're raising.
So what's the likely earliest ETA for the school to open?
I'd need to defer to the Director of Education for that, but I'm happy to get an answer in writing.
That'd be great. Thank you. And then one more question, if I may, Chair. So I just wanted to ask as well that the long, sorry story of the compulsory purchase order attempts for land interest within Temple Square, and just how we're getting on with those as well.
Yep. So Land Assembly is very much active as part of the Temple Quarter project. At this moment in time, we have appointed a specialist CPO Land Assembly advisor, Newsteer, who are very well versed in assembling land for large-scale regeneration projects. My understanding is that Newsteer are actively promoting conversations with those within the regeneration area to acquire by private treaty. Clearly, if we're not able to do so within the timeframes that we need, we are working up a land assembly strategy that may require compulsory purchase in due course, and we'll be coming back to this committee in autumn with a proposal to take forward next steps in line with getting the private sector partner on board.
Thank you. I think given how long it's been going on to try and acquire that particular bit of land, it would be good for us to start speeding up with the CPO process, because we've clearly got nowhere.
Yeah,
the land's now gone up for sale, hasn't it, for a significant sum of money, I notice.
Completely understand that, and I think having our private sector partner on board and pushing forward the master plan next year will be able to put us in good stead in order to be able to take forward what necessary action we need to in due course.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Jenny and then Susan and more hands. We've still got a little bit of time, so I'll see how far we get. Jenny.
Right. I had a couple of points. I think I may mention to some of you at some point about this, sort of tied into what Councillor Eddy was saying about there being lots of different uses on the sites around St Philip's. and maybe there being a process of matchmaking them into new sites, because some of these new buildings will have appropriate sites. And, you know, speaking to the Dings community groups, they're very concerned that it's going to end up with just like another cafe as like every single ground floor use. So could you briefly give a comment on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So part of the engagement work and proposed scenarios is looking at where the new local centre will be. It's also looking at sort of where the active routes are through the master plan area and where those ground floor uses should be, because they'll be so critical in the creating the shape and place. We were down at the Dings Community Group on Thursday just gone, engaging as part of the master plan process, so well aware of their concerns on the scheme. And so I guess two things. One, in the autumn, we will have better identification on where the activation spaces will be, where those ground floor uses will be, and what those uses will be. And we'll be able to go out to consultation on those to sort of feedback. And yes, of course, you know, there is going to be, with development coming forward, we would want to be looking at matchmaking in how we do that. And I think that would link into the business relocation strategy as well. We're very aware of the needs that are coming from community groups and how we incorporate those into the master plan proposals.
Okay, I'm going to just slightly push on that and then move on to the next thing, which is kind of connected, because with most of these sites, like most of the ones that are residential, especially the mid-rise and higher-rise ones, I would expect there to be ground floor uses of some sorts. So that much can be done through the matchmaking. But I suppose there are businesses that are being displaced by like 5 miles or into Devon because there's nowhere to go. And there are spaces opening up currently where the developer is like scooping in some cafe or other where it would have been appropriate according to like planning documents we have generally for other uses to go into them immediately, but they just hadn't been found. So I think that's something I got from the community groups that was quite important to focus on. So that's the pushback as I understand it from them. But if you're speaking to them, that's good at least. And then that kind of goes on to my second question, which is this phase of engagement seems like it's going forward. It's very broad. Hopefully you're getting lots of different ideas. And the next phase, I would expect there to be kind of some, like a range of people who then do more focused engagement with. What are you currently looking at? Have you got any kind of outline of that? And have we published it? Have I missed it for the next phase? Because I guess we're coming to the end of this one, so it'd be good to know what's next.
I can answer a little bit the first, and then I'll pass over to Clem for the second. So I agree with you about ground floor uses. I think it's really important that they thrive in the long term, that they are going to be well used, that they're going to be on the right route, so that in 10 years' time they are still here, rather than having empty blocks throughout the whole, of St Philip's Marsh. So as part of the master planning, we will be wanting to sort of crystallise that. In terms of engagement, I'll pass over to Clem to sort of talk through.
So there isn't yet a kind of shareable plan, although I forget which councillors we shared it with, but forgive me, but for the Southern Gateway, for example, earlier this year we did share a outline plan with a group of councillors, and it was quite helpful getting that feedback. So I think if councillors on this committee are happy to get another email from me, I'll share that around. What we're currently looking at is all of the feedback we've had and how we kind of distill that down to help the master planners. I think part of that process is going to be a bit of a kind of lessons learned on which engagement events and activity went well and which didn't. So it may look a bit different come the autumn. I think we'll have a scenario to go out rather than, as you say, a kind of very broad list of different options that we were just trying to draw some feedback out of. I won't go into too much detail in terms of what has worked, but I think some of the events we've done in and around the area have been quite successful. I think if anyone wants feedback from the public, go to a supermarket, because you'll get lots of passing trade, literally. But yeah, if council is happy, we'll circulate a kind of skeleton plan ahead of the autumn for comment, because I think you guys know your residents better than we do.
Sorry, and I think just to echo that, if there's anything we should be doing better or contacting in terms of who we should approach, then we're more than happy to do that.
Okay, thanks. We've gone slightly over the time budget I had for this item, but obviously it is a key piece of work and we do have some time in hand. So I have got Susan, Cam and Serena who have indicated, and then I'll bring it to a close. So Susan.
Well, I did attend a really good information session with you guys online on Teams recently, which was really informative. And I messaged at the time saying about the infrastructure, and obviously I know that there's a school being built and there's the Bristol University and all this other stuff, but I haven't really heard anything about like primary healthcare services, doctors, dentists, because obviously you've got people who are already living there. If these things are being put into place so that when you get an influx in the new housing eventually, that primary care is already there.
Yep. Just on that, so we met with the ICB 2 weeks ago. We have built in primary healthcare within the master plan to move forward. We are looking at sort of dentistry and other associated healthcare facilities, and we also met with the University of Bristol, who are also putting their own health infrastructure in place in time with their opening in September 26, and looking at ways that we can have joint working to make sure that, again, coming back to the point of creating thriving places, do we put those within the local centre? Where would they be? And that'll start to emerge through the master plan towards the end of this year. We're very alive to the pressure that's faced on the surrounding areas in terms of GPs, and that has come through the engagement that is coming back. So, and we're also very aware that to create successful places in the long term, we need to put the social infrastructure in there to make sure that people can live long term in a healthy place.
Thank you, Karen. Cam and then Serena.
So, firstly, I want to ask about the Southern Gateway and the plans that have gone in for that. Obviously, back in, I think it's February sort of time, there was a councillor briefing on that and a public consultation as well. I'm just wondering, and we had lots of feedback. I'm just wondering, has anything changed since the plans that were shared back then to what's now been submitted? Like, how has that engagement fed into that process?
I knew you'd look at me. Yes, there's and I appreciate, I think it only became online either today or yesterday. There is on the planning portal a community involvement statement, and within that there's a kind of you said we did section. I'm not going to take the risk of trying to remember what's in that. There have been some changes. There was lots of feedback, as you'll be aware, around bus stops and cycle provision and everything like that. So I can take that away and share something via email if that's helpful, to save you having to read 200 planning documents.
I can find that document. I'm also aware a lot of the feedback was around the outside of the site itself. It was around the transport planning around it, like you said, the bus stops and whatnot. So yeah, my other point was around St Philip's Marsh and the master planning there. We were presented with a few different scenarios, but they were all based on the same sort of zoning, which is that the industrial is going to be in the northeast zone, and then there'd be the mixed use in the northwest, and then this southern community in the south, like below the railway. I'd like to know a bit more about the reasoning behind why that's been done that way, because there's some inherent issues with that, like the HGV access for the industrial area and how the southern community could be quite isolated. I mean, what I was thinking about it was, why isn't the industrial in that southern strip where they'd have direct access to the causeway?
There's an awful lot of work sitting behind the master plan. It'd be really helpful if we could arrange a separate session with you to talk talk that through. We have been looking at HGV movements to make sure that it worked from the area that's proposed sort of now, and then also with the southern community looking at sort of what was happening to the south and accessibility into the site. So it would be great if we could sit down with you for sort of half an hour and just walk it through with you and our thinking around that.
Thank you. Serena, and then we'll draw this item to a close and move on.
Yes, I just wanted to flag a point really about the music scene in Bristol and how important that is. So motion is very much applauded, and it's bigged up in the consultation materials. But of course, as we know, since your consultation materials were prepared, motion is closed. So I suppose it's just a plea that within, and I know it's at the early stages now, but a plea that within the master plan process, we do take into account live music venues and where they could be, because it would actually be a new music venue, then the agent of change principle sadly wouldn't apply to it. So it's going to have to meet even more stringent, stringent regulations. But I mean, the irony is with Motion is it was ranked as one of the best clubs, not just in Britain, but the world. And it is, I believe it was a cultural asset. So I just want to make sure that there's a place in future for these sort of venues.
And we would definitely want to see that through the master plan. You know, we want to make sure, well, culture is very important. We're very aware of Motion and the importance to Bristol and across the region. You know, as part of St Philip's Marsh, we'll be wanting to establish a cultural leisure use, possibly in the heart of St Philip's. We want to be getting people in to the marsh as well, you know, and creating sort of a destination. So we would very much want that in our thinking moving forward, and for that to be integrated within the master plan.
I suppose just to come back on that, a live music venue like that, the obvious issue is noise, so therefore it can't be too close to the heart of a community. So, but I just think we need to factor that in.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you. Okay, we are asked to note the report. I hope people found that useful, because I know previous time that we had an update, there was a feeling that maybe we hadn't had them as frequently as people would have liked. So it's hopefully useful, and especially now there's so many things sort of happening in different at different stages of consultation and engagement as well. So thank you very much for the report. We shall consider that noted and move on to item 11, which has been pointed out to me is down in the papers as Development Viability Task and Finish Group, although when you look at the appendix, it then refers to it as a working group, and is certainly the intention is this is a development viability working group rather than task and finish group. So when we do get on to voting for the recommendations, I shall suggest we do it with an amendment that we replace the words task and finish with working as appropriate. Alex, you're going to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for the version control. The appendix was substantially amended, and it was literally the words task and finish to working for the cover report, and I'm sorry that wasn't picked up. So the purpose of this paper is to establish the working group, but also to give some to propose some sort of explanation of why it would be a useful thing for the council to consider. So development often moves in cycles which are closely aligned to wider economic conditions, and sometimes there are peaks and troughs, and sometimes there are blips as well. The evidence that's coming forward, certainly in terms of reports around cost, and then what we're experiencing as a planning authority, is that we may be, along with other cities in the country, experiencing something that isn't a blip, and actually that things have changed because of accelerated construction cost inflation, and then at around the same time, since 2023, the introduction of the Building Safety Act rightly in terms of protecting residents, but what that means in terms of building efficiency and also the process for obtaining additional approvals in relation to that. So the proposal is to convene the working group over a period of time, so that members can consider evidence papers where they existed in the right form, and also to hear from officers, but also from development practitioners, and then to consider and debate and pose questions. And the intention then is to come back later in the year, this calendar year, with a paper to draw out and dwell on some conclusions and potentially some recommendations, which could then inform our approach as a council to working with partners, particularly where they have funding and investment, potentially our approach as a freeholder, because the council has a substantial freehold position in the city, which it uses through the development process, and of course then as a planning authority, if it chooses to review any guidance or policy in the future. The proposal is that there are 4 sessions that meet, that are the membership comprises of this committee, but there is scope to invite other members from other committees as required, and that the sessions will explore viability, and that's an opportunity also for some refresher training about the residual valuation method, which is the process we and the planning process generally uses in relation to planning applications, particularly where it's in relation to affordable housing, and then exploring briefly then what are the challenges that Bristol is facing, and what are the implications of the council, before then moving on to exploration of housing types and tenures, and how things are changing, how things are emerging, some of the trends in the city. The proposal then is to also explore height and density and the Building Safety Act. So there's the spatial implications of that, as well as height in the city and where that's manifesting, and then also to consider construction costs and what's driving those. Session 3 is perhaps a little bit more strategic in that so far it's looking at construction skills and supply chain, so not much can get built without construction companies and people working for them. And then, pertinent to a previous question on the earlier item, infrastructure funding and delivery, including how the development process and planning secures contributions or direct delivery of infrastructure. Wrapping up then with a session where we explore the council's role in this, the implications for the council, and how things could be potentially considered in the future. And I'll wrap up there and take questions.
Thank you. I saw Richard's hand and then Jenny's.
No questions, Chairman. We had a very constructive informal meeting last week, which I hope I know it shaped the work we're doing in the coming months. I must say, one thing certainly impressed itself on me at that meeting. I'd gone away because I'd heard Alex and others talk about Bristol being the 10th city in the world which was most expensive to build in, only to discover then it was the 8th now. So that was alarming. Clearly there are international, national and regional macroeconomic pressures which we can't affect, but there will be things we can, so I do hope we can address that. In the last couple of years, I think that development management have made very significant progress. They've actually shaken that a legacy of being in having a long queue, a long overdue work list of our planning applications, and that they're actually, in my view, being more productive and actually having a more positive relationship with the application sector. I personally feel that could go further. Obviously, we do have a distinct position as the local planning authority, and we have to respect that, of course. But as I constantly say, there are applicants and the planners who are enemies. We are jointly part of the solution to providing housing in Bristol.
Thank you, Richard. Jenny.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, again, no questions, but I think it's worth making a few things kind of very obvious to anyone who's interested in this, because I think it is one of the most hot topics for residents. They're really worried about it. They're really worried about the number of developments coming through that are for students, i.e. not for them, not for their families. They're worried about everything being expensive. And certainly our own residents in council housing are very aware that there's a huge housing waiting list to get into council housing, to change your council house, and the supply of council housing is threatened by this as well as the private sector. So yeah, it will be really interesting to see what solutions we can find, what the industry says to us, and yeah, when we had that pre-meeting that Richard just mentioned, we did say that we wanted to make sure that we're being transparent about those meetings, because it could make it sound like we're all in cahoots with with the developers, and it's much more the case that we are doing research. We want everyone to be aware that we're doing research, and we want a variety of pieces of input. So I think it's worth us saying that in this meeting as well. Yeah, no, I think the final thing I'll say is, yeah, this is a global issue. It's particularly acute in Bristol, but I think in order to overcome this, the government is going to need to help us quite substantially. That's my sort of guess, not to say what outcome we're going to have, but I think that's something we need to be really aware of, that council housing is very important, that the government needs to do as much as it can, and hopefully we'll be able to use this work to kind of form a platform for negotiation with them and with all bodies involved, and maybe we can make things a little bit less dire.
Thank you. I had Serena and then Tom.
Just adding to what Jenny's saying there, that we want communities to be involved in this. We want to respect them. They feel left out a lot of the time. In discussion, we talked at the pre-meeting last week about external contributors, and we've got a long and very sensible list here, such as architects, planning consultants, cost consultants, and the like. But we did say we try and get representatives from community groups along who have been, let's say, most impacted by development. So that could be the Dings resident group or whoever. And I think that would be sensible. That is obviously to an external discussion that they'd be invited to, rather than the whole, all the meetings. But I really would encourage us to do that, because this is a legacy issue as well, and that, yes, viability obviously is essential, and we have to deal with the realities of the property development sector, but what we are doing now, and that includes St Philip's Marsh, is going to be judged in many, many years to come, so 100 years or more. What are we building? how does it serve local people, and it needs to be of high quality.
Thank you, Serena. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really essential and timely piece of work that's coming forward. And I think for anyone that hasn't read the International Construction Costs survey for this year, placing Bristol 8th in the world, it's really essential reading. So it gives a good overview of some of those issues and those pressures. And, I think there's a tendency that everyone wants to have their cake and eat it. And what this council needs to do is prioritise what is it it's going to put first. Or in its top three, is that going to be health infrastructure? Is it public realm? Is it affordable housing? Among the many other competing pressures that there are, what's the role of the West of England Combined Authority in supporting infrastructure development? Yes, what is the role of national government? And they've been very clear, haven't they? £39 billion over 10 years for affordable housing. They'll see 300,000 affordable homes supported. 60% of that is expected to be social rent delivery as well. And I think, talking about council housing and, the whole sector, whether it is council or housing association, is all having challenges with the need to invest in its existing stock. Most councils have been getting C3 regulatory judgments, and there isn't a housing association in the country, I don't think, that has not had to cut its development pipeline of affordable housing in order to invest in its existing homes. So we know this is a systemic issue across the entire country. What we need to be ready with, though, is a plan. Because, if we're going to put more council housing back on the agenda, for example, as well as working with housing associations in the region, then we need to make sure we've got a plan that we can offer up and that we've costed, that could be funded. So, the one thing I'd really like to see, noting that we do need to invest in our existing stock, is a retabling of what a plan could look like for more council housing to go back in the pipeline from this council. Labour stands ready to work with the other parties here to get that to where it needs to be. If you look at the starts on site data that went to the Housing Committee a couple of weeks ago, council housing starts were the majority for 2024-25. So it has been council housing actually that's going to be holding up this city's affordable housing numbers over the next few years, and it would have been even higher had it not been for the two sites where the contracts were terminated for the ones that they were going to take from Gorham. So it's something that we really need to pull together as a bit of a plan. I think more broadly for me, it's making sure that we get some useful output out of this. It's all very well and good us understanding the problem better and pulling that together so we've got almost one single source of truth. That's helpful. But what is it that's then going to come as a result of this piece of work? And I think we need to be really, really clear about what the outcomes are going to be, because otherwise I think we're going to have a nice talking shop for a few months and not really see much come from that. So I'd really urge to really be thinking about that, which does bring me to my question. And unfortunately, the meeting last week was scheduled when I was already unavailable. Why is it a working group? 'Cause it does look like we're going to do a task and then finish, and then things are going to go back. So I'd be keen to understand what I've missed around that, because it does seem like it'd be more appropriate for it to be a task and finish group. And then my follow-up question to that would be to look at the chairing arrangements, because I think we do need to make sure that in the spirit of cross-party work, and that there is a range of parties chairing different working groups across the different policy committees, and that's being shared out evenly. Thank you.
I mean, I come back in briefly, and then so you preempted some of the stuff that I said at that meeting that you weren't at, and B, and that I was going to wrap up here, which was about coming, this helping to define what some of those priorities and trade-offs, frankly, are, when we're looking at some of the issues around viability. The reason it's a working group rather than task and finish is partly because the task, so to speak, is a little bit more nebulous than we're looking to determine. If you look at the High Streets policy, we're looking to determine the criteria that apply when we're looking to fulfil when we're making applications towards to WECA for funding to help our high streets. This work is a little bit more nebulous, and as far as there is that sort of understanding piece, that sort of drilling down and getting greater understanding as a committee of what the issues are, as well as then starting to shape, what we might want to prioritise coming out of that, whether that's, looking at health infrastructure, whether that's affordable homes element, whatever. The other reason for framing it as a working group rather than a task and finish is to help to facilitate bringing in members from other committees. So, for example, development control committees, or health oversight scrutiny commission, whatever it's called, as well, in order to at appropriate points to help drill down into those issues. But I'm sort of ambivalent as to the label, to be honest, because but that's what we've landed at as a working group rather than a task and finish group. Alex, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. So whether it's a working group or a task and finish group, I do think that it's important that as it progresses, we are able to note things that are actually within the gift of the council or the gift of the city and its partners to make some progress on, or make some recommendations for change, and we should bank those effectively so that we do have some tangible outputs. That might be something about guidance, it might be something about working with partners. So we should ensure that we get tangible outputs that could become an outcome from the working group. Definitely, that's how I would anticipate us doing this. If I may, around the involvement of local people, I agree that is something we discussed, and I'm glad you raised it today because that's something we can include.
Come back, Tom.
Yeah, I think just obviously because we had a agenda meeting of the Leeds, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, so I'm a bit surprised it didn't bottom out if it was going to be changed there. But Task and Finish Group's going to invite people from other committees and all sorts to do their work. They don't have to be made up of the policy committee either. The culture working groups, probably, or culture task and finish is probably a good example where it's drawing from a wider group. So I'm just a bit kind of uncomfortable with the process we seem to have arrived at. And I think part of the issue was how late in the day the meeting last week was organised. I was never available to do it and would have welcomed to have been able to have been there. And I appreciate there's a challenge in trying to sort out everyone's diaries and things like that. But, I think, just be a bit more mindful of that. If we're going to make a cross-party system work, there's a bit of give and take there, isn't there?
There were members from all parties there. So, there was, every party was represented. But, I take your points, and it's not, it's always a challenge with people's diaries, and especially when things come at a bit shorter notice. So I'll take that on the chin. Okay, Toby, I saw you indicate. Okay, in that case, shall we move to the recommendations? As I said, I'm ambivalent about whether it's a task and finish or a working group, but my understanding was that,
This is a version control error. I'm sorry about that, but it's
that's fine. So we are working group, and the proposal is for myself to chair. But again, I'm ambivalent about that. But that's a proposal. So we'll move to a vote. So that the vote is on the Committee for Economy and Skills. Note the report and further details supplied. And actually, am I going to have to do a formal amendment process for amending it? Sorry, I'm going to have to consult with the clerk.
So if there's consensus in the room to change the recommendation as a working group, then I would say go ahead. But I don't think there is, so we might have to move that as a recommendation, take the vote on that, and then if that passes or not passes, we can go to the substantive.
Okay, so I'm going to propose that we amend the recommendations so that instead of being framed as a task and finish group, it's framed as a working group. I need a seconder for that proposal. So Richard right in there first. So all in favour of that, put up your hand. So that's 6. Those against, that's 3. So that's carried. So now we move the formal recommendation that the Committee for Economy and Skills notes the report and further details supplied in Appendix A and approves the recommended approach and terms of reference for the Viability Working Group, that the Committee for Economy and Skills agree the frequency and duration of the meetings to inform the terms of reference, and that the Task and Finish Group reports to the Economy and Skills, and that the Working Group reports to the Economy and Skills Committee with conclusions and recommendations later in the year. So, seconder again, Richard again, and those in favour. That's 6. Those against? And abstentions. There we go. So that is passed, and we will proceed with the working group, and we will report back later in the year accordingly. So we move on to agenda item 12, Adult and Community Learning Overview and Funding Proposal.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a wee second there, so handing over to Jane to take on this item.
Thank you very much. So this paper comes to you today to give you a bit of an overview of the Council's Adult and Community Learning Service and to seek approval for 2 key learning proposals. So the Adult and Community Learning Service in Bristol is a bit of a jewel in the crown. We feel that it consists of 2 key strands of lifelong learning. But both these strands together, they really help bring diverse communities together. This work supports really strong cohesion and social networks. It contributes to well-being and economic and social inclusion. So what you have here is the targeted government-funded provision, community learning, and that's aimed at people 19 plus with few or no formal qualifications, those living in our most deprived communities, and it consists of a programme that combines functional skills, literacy, numeracy, ESOL, digital skills, with employability and engagement courses that help strengthen engagement and resilience. That provision is subject to Ofsted, and last year the service secured a strong grade 2 with outstanding for learner attitudes and behaviour. On the adult learning service side, that's a fee-paying service designed really for personal development. And that is a rich programme of arts, languages, philosophy, gardening, and many more courses, attended by lots of older learners, providing them with structure, quality of life, and support for skills and well-being. So the community learning side, the targeted provision, is funded through the Combined Authority, the West of England Combined Authority. And over the last 3 years, the Combined Authority have been very supportive of this provision. We've seen the funding level increase by £500,000 over the last 3 years, whereas for the previous period, it had virtually been frozen, which in a sense is a cut. And in this financial year, or academic year, the DFE put forward a 7% national cut for this type of provision. And the Combined Authority actually protected the funding the council receives, so we only experienced 0.7%. So we can see a bit of a pattern of real support for this community learning, which is great. But we know that next year, the Combined Authority have indicated they want to start a completely new commissioning process. So we felt this was the right time to bring this work and paper to you so you feel prepared for when we come back, probably the beginning in 2026, with that process and where that is heading. So for this academic year, which is about to start, August the 1st, the contract starts to the end of July. Angela here and her team had to prepare a detailed curriculum plan setting out the city's priorities for community learning. That's all gone really well, and as a result, the Combined Authority are offering us a contract for the year. But the officers there, they're very mindful that in order to really build and sustain this provision, we need to diversify our funding. We don't just sit still, relying on what we've always had. And Angela and her team were very successful in applying for some skills bootcamp funding. This is a major government stream of funding which is designed more to support adults develop the skills for particular sectors and particular new opportunities in key sectors. And for the council's community learning team, they've been successful in skill bootcamp in digital skills for work, digital marketing, eSol for health, and introduction to construction project management, which is our on-site apprenticeship provision. Now, on the adult learning side, that doesn't receive any government funding. It's not subject to Ofsted, and the provision is funded entirely through learner fees. But because over the last 2 years, you'll appreciate with the introduction of higher national insurance rates and other increased costs like energy, we need to make sure the fee can cover those costs. So we're bringing you today a proposal of a very small increase in the fee. And I'm pleased to report there is no sign that slight increase is impacting on the appetite for Bristol adult learning. This month, the new programme was launched. They had a bit of a countdown for when the programme was going to go live. And within the first few days, they'd taken almost 10% of their planned income for the year. So we think it's been set at the right rate. So in conclusion, you have there before you some details about Bristol's adult and community learning service and the proposals relating to the take-up of the WECA funding for community learning and for a slight increase in the adult learning fee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. That's really a good report, and I'm pleased that you've brought it. Has anybody got any questions or comments that they want to make on this? I seen Toby's hand.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Jane, for the report. Really comprehensive and useful. It's a bit disappointing that the Labour government is reducing this funding, given how much focus they've put on skills and employability in the sort of outward comms. But nevertheless, I'm glad that WECA has backed up our programme by filling that funding gap. So clearly there's some evidence behind that decision that our programme is able to deliver. You mentioned the new approach that the Combined Authority is looking to take, and it sounds a bit ominous, and I detect a level of concern, and I suspect you won't be drawn too much on your concerns at this point, but do we understand why they're looking to move to a new approach? And also with the activities this year, will we be ensuring a smooth transition to a new approach, whatever the new approach may be?
Thank you, Toby. That's a really good question. There is a shifting policy context for adult skills, and when you look at what's coming through, there's a really big emphasis generally on growth and kind of to drive economic prosperity. The government is preparing a new white paper on post-16 and skills. I'm very fortunate on behalf of the council. I've been asked to join a workforce which is looking at that white paper. So I can see what's coming, and I've been able to put in some views. And it's very much tying adult skills to the industrial strategy. And they talk about the 8+2 sectors. They're kind of super sectors. They're these very kind of high growth sectors. So for example, high engineering is one of those. And obviously automation and digital, high level digital skills is another. The first meeting with the DFE officials, you can see their frustration. And one of the officials said how good it would be if they could flick a switch and they could just create this pathway of people flowing into the right courses against these 8 sectors. But of course we see in our work in community learning, it is not as simple as that. And actually we're working with many people in the city who left school with few or no formal qualifications. They felt quite bruised by formal education. It's not that they're not skilled, they simply perhaps didn't receive education in the most accessible way. And what's critical is that they have the first rung of the skills ladder, which is not always at level 3 or an A level. There has to be something that takes people back through a journey where they can fill in the gaps. So I guess our concern is that in order to fulfill the emphasis on growth, that the funding will be switched across to higher level skills. So we're just maintaining our view and our advocacy for Bristol people that there is some funding there for that really critical first step learning. So that's why we felt we should really come here with this report.
Thank you, Jane. Cam and then Susan. Sorry.
So I've got a question. It's not directly off the back of this report, but it's around my understanding of what's happening around functional skills and ESOL at City of Bristol College, and I believe other colleges in the area. And there's probably a bit of Chinese whispers here. I don't know the exact details, and probably not going to get it completely right. But my understanding is though that the City of Bristol College has been told to not fund those courses anymore by WECA because that WECA wants to direct people towards community learning. But then the outcome of that at the moment is that there's not enough of those courses within the community, and so that people are getting left behind and nowhere to go. I see a bit of shaking and nodding, so maybe I've not got that completely right, and maybe that's a conversation to have after this meeting. I don't know.
No, Cam, that's a timely question. It's a good question. We are very much in the vortex of lots of demands for ESOL, and the Community Learning Service does a really great job at providing that entry-level ESOL in community settings. One of the issues we have is we feel we don't have the detailed overview of the total demand. So you get anecdotal evidence, So we've worked in an ESOL network with the colleges across the west of England and with our community partners. Refugee Action is one of them. And collaborative partnership have worked up a proposal to the Combined Authority for something they're calling an ESOL hub. And this would consist of all the providers using a standard assessment system, which would enable us to then all see the demand and to make sure the provision is at the right level and doing the right things. To this point, we don't have a clear response from the Combined Authority, but that remains one of our priority propositions to them. But no, my understanding is the City of Bristol College are still receiving WECA funding for accredited ESOL, and the Community Learning Service is continuing to provide its community-based ESOL with links to the college. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, just to talk about the sort of continuity between this year and subsequent years, WECA have sort of upped the ante a little bit, so we get a little bit of what's coming this year. And so to hit those ESOL requirements, we've been asked to put programs together instead of just single courses, and the college would have been asked to do the same. But because the programs are longer, we can do less. So, you know, the longer the program is for each individual, the fewer individuals you can meet, support. So that might be where some of this Chinese whispering is coming from, because we've both the college and us have had to reduce our offer because what we're offering to individuals is longer. With the view to getting people into work, because we're adding initial assessment and career advice and guidance into that mix, which for those who get onto the programme is really powerful. It's understanding what we do about those who are not on those programmes yet. So that's what we're campaigning for, is to keep that, what they call tailored learning out there in the community, engagement, making sure people get the opportunity to gain skills and knowledge for all sorts of reasons, independent living, community cohesion, as well as employment.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. And it specifically was level 2 ESOL, but I think you've answered. Thanks.
Thank you. Susan.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank the WECA Mayor for using money given by the government to fund such a fantastic service. Community education, as we know, is absolutely a bit of a backbone for people, especially in areas of deprivation where there's a struggle to get into employment and to access some of the skills that you guys provide on your course. But do you have an element of what progression and how they kind of transfer after community learning? You know, what is the progression? Do you actively monitor the transition into other courses or into employment?
Yeah, that's very important to us, and we think community learning, it's not about recruiting learners and then keeping them for 15 years on the, you know, going round and round. We see it as a service which is about progression. So Angela and her team do really good tracking. So when people finish their course, they're given support from day one in terms of thinking where they're going to go next. Sometimes they might need another go at community learning. It's not a fixed cut-off, but we're alongside them all the way, giving them advice and guidance about what they might do next, whether that's further learning, higher learning, volunteering, or going into employment. So in your pack, in the information pack, you've got the detailed results of that tracking. You can see what those learners are telling us, where they end up. We get some great stories back from people. The team do really well at getting that tracking information back. I think you bribe them, don't you? Yeah.
20 quid.
Yeah. And but we get some really good stories of where people have used the confidence and the skills they've built to take that next step. But I think your progression rate is 53% off the top of my head.
Very good, off the top of your head. Well read. Yeah, we get about a 20 to 25% return rate on our tracking, which is really quite high for something that just goes out to people who, you know, it's like you move on and you forget maybe a little bit about what's enabled that for you. So we're really proud that people do respond to our tracking. And that's the positive progression that we count is work, further learning or volunteering, because those are the three real next stepping stones for progression, whether that's in your own independent life or getting into work. But we have lots of other positive progressions. People leave the house when they've never left the house before. They've got on a bus to get into the town centre when they've never, you know, we're talking about learners who really, really are isolated. So, yeah, progression's good from community learning. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. We're pretty much at time for that item. And I've not seen anyone else indicate, but thank you very much for bringing that. I love your enthusiasm every time you come, Jane. You know, and the amount of detail and joy that you bring together is rare to see in this chamber at times. So thank you. So we shall move on to vote on this. So we are asked to authorise the Head of Service for Employment Skills and Lifelong Learning, in consultation with myself as Chair of the Economy and Skills Committee, to take all steps required to negotiate with WECA and the ESFA to accept and spend all adult skills tailored learning and skills bootcamp funding streams of up to £2 million to deliver the community learning and skills bootcamp programmes outlined in the report, and also to approve the adult learning service, approve the adult learning service fees policy for 25-26. So have I got a seconder? That's Serena. And all those in favour? And those, nobody's against, because we've gone back to unanimity. So thank you very much. We shall move on to the quarterly performance report for Q4 24-25. And this is Shane. So over to you, Shane.
Good afternoon. I'll quickly whiz through most of the bits on this so we can get to questions quickly. So of all the business plan actions that were in quarter 4, 11 of 12 were on track, which was 92%. 78% of business plan priority metrics, which had data, were either on target or better, which is 7 out of 9. And 86% of priority metrics with relevant data are better than they were this period a year ago. So 6 out of 7 are doing better than they were a year ago. There are 5 city outcome measures with data for Q4, 3 of which are performing better than they were last year. Though the outcome measures we don't have targets set against. Particularly key points to highlight that have been highlighted within it. Of the actions, the only action that was behind schedule was to establish a joint delivery team for Temple Quarter and procure a development partner for the first phase of delivery, continue progress on regeneration plan across the wider city, including Western Harbour, White House Street, Frome Gateway, Bedminster Green, Lockleys and Knoll West. I'm aware that they've spoken earlier here, probably on a slightly more up-to-date version of what I would have been presenting about anyway, so I'll quickly skip over the sort of contextual part of that. The proportion of 16 and 17-year-olds who are not in education, employment or training or not known has fallen back to significantly behind target of 5% at 6.3% after a good level of performance in the previous 2 quarters. This has been due to an increase in leavers from colleges between December and March. The team have been contacting these young people and supporting them to find short-term provision and accessing employment until the end of the year. It's been an increased experience of work opportunities for priority group has improved to ahead of target from significantly behind target, which it has been at for the rest of the year. This was unexpected due to staff shortages and having a smaller time frame to deliver in. This does, however, reflect the new projects undertaken by Works since September and demand from schools and other provisions to provide opportunities to those most in need. The percentage of procurement spend with micro, small and medium business sized enterprises has an outturn of 59.1%, which was 6.1% better than the target, which reaffirms our commitment to spending money with a diverse range of businesses. There were 5 city outcomes, as I mentioned before, recorded 3 of which performing better than last year. Appendix 2 for this item was accidentally sent out as economy of, what was it? Is it called economy of place rather than economy and skills, which is the environment one. This information is the information that is in the dashboard anyway, just sliced down in a way that makes it more easily readable for this committee. There has been a new version of that circulated, and I hope it will be replaced on there if it has not been already. Is there any questions?
Tom. Sorry, and thank you, Shane.
So, you talked very briefly about what's being done to address the measure we're not on target for in terms of NEAT. Is there anything else that can be shared other than proactively contacting? You know, what's the outcomes from that? How is that being done? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, post 16 is in my service area. First thing to say is one of the things that happens here with post 16 NEAT is that if you cleanse your data so that you reduce the number of young people not known, actually your NEAT numbers go up because you now know where they are. So for local authorities that got a lot of not knowns and very low NEAT, that's not so good, if you see my point. So in part, this has been driven because we know exactly what's going on in Bristol, and our not knowns are in the top quintile now. We're really leading the way with our data management. But what happened to us this year, you can see that for the previous 2 quarters, it was going great. The green was even going darker green. The team thought they'd really smashed it and were really pleased. What happened was between the end of that autumn term and coming back in January, the local college parted company with about 135 young people. So these are young people who had started study programs. They'd passed the first census date, which is in October. So we thought they were going to be on programme, and they were then, for whatever reason, they disengaged. So the team then they've had a really busy spring trying to connect with those young people and get them back on track. And one of the issues we have in Bristol is if you do disengage, the funding for post-16 programmes are usually 2-year full-fat programmes. And if you drop out, it's really difficult to find anything that will take you mid-year or part-way through the year. So one of the things we've been doing about that is there's 2 things. One is we made a case to the combined authority that really we needed some extra resource for some short, sharp programs to get young people back into education quickly. Because if you leave it for 6 months or more, it's unlikely they'll come back. And we were successful in that proposition to them. And that had to be negotiated with the other local authorities as well. And there's a new NEAT reduction programme starting in October for 2 years. And that's going to involve a programme for 16, 17-year-olds who become NEET, but we've also put some funding in there for young people, 15, who look very risky, that before they leave school might become NEET. So we're really pleased about that. See if we can get in early. The other thing that's happened is, you're probably aware, the government's youth guarantee. It's brilliant because the West of England are a trailblazer, and Bristol is a recipient of funding through that. And because it was 1 year's worth of funding, we've started with a major programme in South Bristol. And any young person that in South Bristol that becomes NEET from 17 up to 21 can get access to a coach, one-to-one coach, a pre-recruitment training programme, and a work trial with lots of goodies part of that. So there's been a real injection of resource, and when we hear what young people ask for, very often it is this it's this one-on-one support they want. They want a trusted adult who can be alongside them, guiding them through finding courses or finding jobs, and giving them advice and support along the way. So it's really great we've got that resource now to see if we can fix the problem.
Yeah, big youth guarantee scheme. It's really good to see South Bristol being a pilot, and just shows the amount of, even if funding has been reduced in one of the areas, the amount of significant additional funding that's coming in, I think, around the skills agenda. I just wanted to dive in a bit more, though, to 135 people, young people parting ways. That seems quite high. What's gone wrong?
Well, we're having conversations with the college. We've been having conversations with them all through the year, and we work very closely with them, and the post-16 link in around young people. I think some of this is cooked into education policy. So our local college, you may know, has, in the past has struggled with inadequate judgments through Ofsted, and for a long time they were requiring improvement, which was not good for our city and our young people. Now there's been a lot of work by the new principal on increasing that quality, and that means having standards around behaviour, attendance, and it's something that schools experience as well. Is if you focus on quality, sometimes it can work against inclusion. It kind of, those things collide. So what we're trying to do is to see how we can just support that inclusive practice both across schools and colleges, so we keep young people in learning.
So it sounds like they've been off-rolled then, most of those, by the college?
It's a whole mix of reasons. I mean, they will say to you, the young people discover they're on the wrong course. And the college did introduce something called swap, don't drop. So they try really hard to help the young person find an alternative in the college, but sometimes it doesn't work. It's the whole environment, and that they're kind of, they're deciding that they don't want.
Just one final point. I think it'd be good then for this to be, because there's an attendance working group with the Children and Young People's Committee starting to just hope that this is being picked up there, and if not, can we make sure it is, if it's within the scope of what the committee is looking at. I just don't know how focused their work is, whether it's just primary. But yeah, that'd be helpful.
That's a really good point, and obviously where we have seen issues around attendance in our schools, obviously that is impacting post-COVID on those coming through who were impacted by COVID. So it's a similar issue coming through the whole system. Yeah.
Thank you. It's really helpful to have such a comprehensive response.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. I was going to ask, are there any, obviously these are the Q4 figures for last year, and we're now into Q2 of this year. Do we have any indication of how things are looking for Q1 against the target? As, you know, we obviously still working through this particular, you know, pick up in the rate, but, you know, do you feel you are working through it?
Yes. Of course, NEAT figures are seasonal. So this quarter, it always goes up because you've got young people who are now starting to leave school before they've found and joined their programme, and we have a period where we're waiting to get confirmation that they've arrived. We have a planned destination, but have they got there? So unfortunately, this isn't the best quarter. You have to compare each quarter with the one before, if that makes sense. So we can come back with a further update. I think at the next committee we will know more then about those that have achieved their September guarantee.
Thank you for that, Jane. Okay, I'm going to move it on. So we're asked to note that, so we'll consider that noted. And move on to the corporate risk report for Q1 24-25. Alex, are you presenting this? I'll just preface Alex's remarks to say that Emma is still with us, but with regards to, so if there are any immediate questions on the corporate risk, emergency planning response risk, Emma can respond, but also to make sure you're all aware that I've agreed with the leads from the various parties that we have an update, an in-depth update offline on this at either after a future meeting or, you know, as an additional meeting to go into this in a lot more detail. Obviously, it's you know, it's a very sensitive area, so do bear that in mind when we're looking at the risk. And with that, over to Alex.
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, very briefly in relation to the cover report, there is in relation to this committee, there is a single risk which is exhibiting at a school that is put in the corporate risk register, and that is in relation to the emergency planning and response team's ability to prepare and respond to emergencies. That's also a static risk because it's been at that level for some time now. I'm not sure there's much more I can add without having the detailed knowledge of the head of service being able to ask any questions you may have.
I've not got my microphone on either.
Yeah, no, I think it's, you know, we understand this risk, and we understand that it's got a lot of mitigations, but the main factor is the level of staff. And having had a bit of briefing from Emma previously, I'm aware that one of the reasons that it's still high and we're still waiting for the staff is because of the security clearance requirements, which aren't really in our control. It's like the police do that. So I don't know. I'm just saying public, I hope the police can expedite our work because this is a really, really high risk for the city. And I was wondering if there's anything that we can do to sort of get our priorities delivered. And it's quite surprising to me that the extent of the delays that can be caused by that. So, yeah, if you want to waffle about that, I support you doing so, because I think it's important everyone understands that practical issue.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. The police level vetting is done by Avon and Somerset or other police forces, and we are at the mercy of their timescales, and if they're busy doing police stuff, we can be second priority to their police own vetting. We plan on average, because it affects my entire service, not just the emergency planning team, the whole of the ops centre. It is 3 to 6 months to get that vetting back to fill a position. However, for the two in this particular risk, we actually have spoken to people and moved some things along, and we have start dates agreed for the two new people who are coming into the ops centre. We have agreed dates, we have agreed the start dates. They will be in September, and beginning of September, and actually in August. And so, but they're part of a number of mitigations, as you know, which, unlike other mitigations, stop and start the minute there's an incident, especially a major incident.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Any other questions, or shall we move on? No, not seeing anybody else indicate. So thank you very much, Emma, for sticking around to respond to that. Thank you, Alex, for introducing the paper. And we move on to the quarterly finance report for period 2. It's slightly oddly phrased in this quarterly finance report, period 2, quarter 1. Anyway, over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the cover note here is relatively short and refers to that full reports have been delivered to the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee, and that other policy committees then receive the same report and then relevant appendices that are related to the portfolio of that committee. So you can see the full report that was taken to Strategy and Resources Committee, and then in particular Appendix 8, which has a summary position in relation to this committee, although just to note it doesn't include skills, which skills financial position is reported to the Children's Committee, so which is a bit of a quirk of the approach here. You'll see that there is currently within the non-skills services relating to this committee, there's an underspend of about 0.9 million, and that's explained because of better than anticipated development management fees in planning, and then underspends being held within the Bristol Music Trust and the Culture Investment Programme, not yet having distributed as many grants as anticipated, or a lower level due to applications in the process. Includes a summary of savings delivery, so all of the savings currently in delivery associated with this committee are rated as green, so expect to be realised, and then includes a section on capital, which is showing an outturn variance of just over £6 million underspend, with some notable sources of that underspend being around flood risk management. That's an accounting issue, and then because of the way that with the partners with whom we work and their financial accountability, and then Bedminster Green and local centre work. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Alex. Any questions or comments? There are no questions or comments at this point. So, in which case I shall consider this noted. Thank everyone for... no, it's just for information. Thank you everyone for sticking with us to the end. We have ended ahead of schedule, so thank you to those who were brief with their comments and questions. And the next meeting is scheduled for Monday the 22nd of September at 2 p.m. So I shall see you all then.